Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Adobe Apps for Education webinar. Today we're going to be focusing on Flash Professional, and our presenter is the wonderful Joseph Labrecque. I always love sessions with Joseph. I learn something every time, as do I in most of these actually. And we're going to be focusing on, I think, one of the coolest topics in education at the moment, and that's the creation of infographics. Such a wonderful learning journey for students to go on, both for IT skills as well as knowledge construction. So Joseph is, as many of you may or may not know, a senior interactive software engineer at the University of Denver, and a key figure in the Adobe education world, as well as Adobe design world and Adobe development world as well. So Joseph is a big personality and a big presence on the Adobe Education Exchange, and if ever you're looking for his resources, you'll be able to find them there. This session is being recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording to you all in an email at the end, probably within about 24 hours. But I'll also link it. You'll be able to find the recording both at the place that you did registration, as well as at this link here. So Joseph, I am going to switch over to you and mute myself. And before you turn your audio on, just share your screen, and I'll just chat through that so we don't have any dead air time. We're good to go. And over to you, Joseph. I'll interrupt you about a minute out. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay, so can everybody hear me just fine? All right, perfect. So what we're going to be talking about today is creating animated infographics inside of Flash Pro. And one of the reasons, we were talking a little bit about Halloween beforehand, one of the reasons that I would choose the subject that I've chosen here, and here's a blog post that I'm going to publish after this, is because it is almost Halloween in the United States. And a lot of people, see absinthe as something that you can, a lot of people experiment with it on Halloween, and they do it wrong. So the infographic is meant to teach people how to do it correctly and provide some facts and so forth. How I normally start out doing a lot of things is inside of Adobe Illustrator. Here's an Illustrator file where I sort of created a bunch of my assets and also sort of laid out my ideas for the infographic. The infographic inside of Flash Pro actually doesn't look exactly like this. This is more sort of a proving ground for the different ideas. Then I bring this into Flash Professional, and from there, I'm able to sort of really flesh things out and solidify those ideas. But this part's important because here's where I choose my typefaces, and I choose the different points I want to go over, and I also create all my assets. So you can see here, this is a Adobe Illustrator file, and I've tried to keep everything as vector format. And of course, Flash Professional handles vectors very, very well. Flash Player handles vectors very, very well. So this stuff easily can be translated into Flash Pro from Illustrator. So how do we do that exactly? It's pretty simple. You just create a new document inside of Flash Professional. And here you can see under Create New that we have a lot of different options for FLA types and class types and things we can create. These first two are HTML5 focused. You can target Canvas or WebGL. And we'll look at these options in the advanced session later this afternoon. But you can also choose a basic ActionScript 3 type. And this is actually the most powerful type because you can use all of the tools inside of Flash Professional to really lay out your graphics, animate them, add interactivity, and so forth. So we're going to choose ActionScript 3 for this project. And to import the Illustrator file, all you need to do is go to File, Import, and from here you can choose to import to Stage or import to Library. If you import to Library, it's going to create like movie clip symbols out of all of your different assets. And you don't really have as much control over things, in my opinion, when you do that. If you import things to Stage, what'll happen is you can choose your assets file. So here's my Illustrator assets. And if I open this, I get all of these different import options. I can choose my artboard. So if I have multiple artboards inside of Illustrator, I can choose the one that I want. And I can also make decisions around how I want to import my layers. So do I want to maintain editable paths and effects? So do I want to keep this stuff as vector graphics, or do I want to flatten them to bitmap? I want to keep them as vector because Flash Pro handles vector beautifully. Text conversions. Initially, you might want to bring it in as editable text, but you could also choose at this point to render all the text as vectors as well. But you can do that afterwards, and we'll actually do that afterwards in this case. But we're going to bring it in initially as an editable text. And we can also choose if we want to bring in each layer as a flash layer, or sort of just dump them all as a single flash layer, or choose keyframes and so forth. You'll also notice here if there's any incompatibility, so things that you did inside of Illustrator that aren't quite supported inside of Flash Pro, it'll tell you that there's some incompatibilities. In this case, it's just some stuff around extrude and bevel for the sugar cube that I rendered inside of Illustrator. And what'll happen with the sugar cube is it'll actually be rendered to a bitmap image. And here's some stuff about paragraphs and multiple lighting values and so forth, which actually works out okay, as you'll see in a moment. And this is pretty neat too. You can match the stage size. So right now my stage, you can see my properties panel here is 550 by 400. The stage inside of Flash Pro is basically the window, the visible window in which all of the animation and things like that occur. So you can have things outside of the stage in the periphery, but that stuff actually doesn't appear to the user. So here I want the stage to be exactly the same size, so I'll hit OK. All right. So you'll see that what happens is we actually get everything that we spelled out inside of our Illustrator file inside of our Flash Pro document. And you know, we could really just keep it like this. You'll notice inside of my timeline, so timeline is where you organize your different layers and all of the assets on those layers. In here, we can see that the names have come over. So if you organize everything in Illustrator first and then bring it over, things will work out much, much nicer when you actually go through and need to, do stuff inside of Flash Pro. So I wanted to see how I actually decided to lay this stuff out and how it's different. We can close this out. There it goes. And then I've got some files prepared. So here's a file called layoutcomplete.fla. And this is, again, an Actions 3 document. And these are all the same assets, all the same text files and things like that that came in from Illustrator, except I've arranged them in a basic top-down approach. So we have our title here, and then we go step by step. So we have some text, and we can see in the properties panel, this is a basic static text area. And you can, of course, create that through the text tool if you're creating this stuff, from scratch. Illustrator just brings it over for you. And then each of these objects here I've actually converted when they've come in into movie clip symbols. Any movie clip symbols are actually going to appear inside of your library. So this is very powerful. Movie clip symbols, it's like self-contained additional animated timelines that you can do stuff with. It's almost like a bunch of little tiny Flash animations or modules inside of the main timeline. So it gives you, really complete control over everything you want to have happen. And movie clip symbols are animated in some very special ways through motion tweens and classic tweens. We'll see motion tweens and some other stuff too as we go along here. So that's how this is arranged right now. Step 2, step 3, 4, and 5. So you can see I've basically got the very, very basics of the layout created here. And because I'm using movie clip symbols for something like my absinthe glass, you'll notice the absinthe glass appears in really just about every step. However, it's all the same glass symbol. So reuse of assets is really important inside of Flash Professional. And then, of course, we have down at the bottom, and this wasn't included in my original Illustrator document, we have a number of different absinthe facts here. So For instance, people make a big deal about the high percentage of alcohol in an absinthe. Well, if you prepare a glass properly using the traditional method, which is explained in this infographic, it actually clocks into about the same ABV as a glass of wine. So it's really not actually a high alcohol beverage. So little facts like that we put down there. So what are we going to do with this document now that we have all of our assets laid out? What we can do is start creating some movie clip symbols for each particular animated step that we want to create. So as I mentioned, we already have movie clip symbols for each of these objects. And one of the reasons we do that is because we want to reuse the objects, so the spoon, the glass, whatever. So here we want to create specific movie clip symbols that contain an animation for each step. So for this initial step here, we want to pour a measure of absinthe into the glass. So we want to animate that. And to do that, we'll create a movie clip symbol. So what we'll do is select both of those objects that we want to be part of this movie clip symbol. And I'm using the basic selection tool here to do that. We can actually use a number of methods to do that. We can shift click on each one to choose multiples, or we can just draw a selection rectangle around the two. And once we have our objects selected that we want to be part of this movie clip symbol, we'll choose Modify, Convert to Symbol, and then here we'll choose Type of Movie Clip. And we'll give it a name that makes sense. So what makes sense here is something like Step 1. And then we can just name them all Step 1 through 5. In terms of advanced settings here, this is mostly for ActionScript. And since we're not doing any ActionScript in this morning session, we just don't even need to deal with that. So you can keep that collapsed. And we'll hit OK. So now two things happen. You'll notice that there's a rectangle around the entire object. And inside of our library, there's actually a Step 1 movie clip symbol. So here it is right here. What we can do is actually enter into that movie clip symbol, and you can see we're no longer inside of the root, which is called Scene 1 by default. That's the main timeline. We're actually inside of this movie clip symbol, Step 1. And we have our own unique little timeline inside of there. So we'll revisit this in a moment. But we want to go through back out to the root, so you can just click on Scene 1 to go back out. And here we can do the same thing with each other step. So we can choose the glass and the spoon, convert to symbol. We'll call that Step 2. Scroll down. We'll choose the glass, the spoon, and the sugar cube. Convert to symbol. Step 3. And here we have the glass, the spoon, the sugar cube, and a carafe. Select all of those. Modify. Convert to symbol. Step 3, is it? Are we at 3 now? Let me see. I've already got 3, so this must be 4. And then the last step, Step 5, is just a spoon and the glass. So modify, convert to symbol. Step 5. All right, so now each of these is its own little movie clip symbol. So now that we have each one of these as a movie clip symbol, we can go in and animate their individual timelines to create this little animated, looping animation for each one. So I'm going to do this first one here. And here we have, of course, our bottle of absinthe, and then our absinthe glass. So the first thing we need to do, and this is very, very important when you're doing any sort of tweening or animation inside of Flash Professional, is that each object needs to be on its own specific layer inside the timeline. Now we could do that manually, just going down and creating a new layer and then copying and pasting objects on the timeline, but there's actually a shortcut in here. We can select both objects, right-click, and just choose Distribute to Layers. So you'll notice now we have that layer 1 where everything used to be, which I can delete. I don't need that anymore. And then we have the glass layer and the absinthe layer. So each one of these objects is on its own particular layer, and they're ready to be animated. So one of the really cool things about this is it's simply adopting, the name from the movie clip symbol. So, I don't even have to name these layers. It saves me a lot of different steps. So what we need to do now is animate this. So we're going to think, what are we going to do? You should always, of course, think ahead as to what exactly you want to do when you're animating something, or else, things could get screwy. So here we have our timeline. We can just say, well, maybe we'll go out to, say, frame 80. So let's select these two frames on each of the layers on frame 80, and we want to extend our frames out to frame 80. Right now, we only have one frame on frame 1, so that's not really an animation, that's just a static image. So let's go to frame 80 and choose Insert, Timeline, and we're going to insert frame. What this is going to do is actually insert a span of frames from frame 1 to frame 80. So both of these objects are now present on each of those frames, and we can scrub the playhead back and forth. And of course, the properties of these objects aren't any different between frames right now, so we don't see any animation, but this is technically animated content at this point, simply because, it's across different frames. So how do we actually make it animated? One thing we want to do is lock our glass layer, because we're not actually going to be animating the glass at all. The only thing we're going to be animating is the bottle of absinthe here. So what we'll do is right-click on this frame span we just created and choose Create Motion Tween. Once we do that, you'll notice the entire frame span turns blue. This indicates that this is a motion tween we're working with now. So we've just sort of opened up a whole bunch of different possibilities in terms of how we deal with this object across time. You'll notice that the layer symbol here, the icon, looks like a little square that's sort of moving here to there as well. So that's another indicator that we have a motion tween. So what we want to do, and motion tweens are very, very easy to work with. You may remember if you used Flash in the past, if you use the old type of motion tween, which is now termed as a classic tween, you would have to go through and create a bunch of keyframes and manage those keyframes, across time. And it was, it serves its purpose, but this is actually a lot easier for newcomers to deal with, because all you need to do to animate something is to move the playhead to a certain point and select the object, and then simply do something with it. So change the property somehow. So in this case, I just use my arrow key to just move it 1 pixel to the right and then 1 pixel back to the left. And what does that do for us? Well, you can see it creates a little tiny diamond here. This is a keyframe that's specific to motion tweens. So inside of there, we now have a little keyframe. And what keyframes are is you can think of them as sort of the steps, the key steps in the animation, and then Flash Professional is going to fill in those steps computationally. It's going to decide how it wants to animate something from X to Y, let's say. So let's actually see that happen. If we go over to frame 25, and let's actually move this bottle of absinthe up here. So you'll notice now we can really see things happening, because we do actually have motion here. Between here and here, the X and Y coordinates have changed. If you want to actually see how this works, we can double click on this motion tween, and this brings up the new motion editor, and we can see that both X and Y change over time. And you can actually manipulate all of these different curves and things here. You can add eases. There's all sorts of things you can do inside this motion editor. And if you want it to go away, you don't need to ever use the motion editor if you don't want to. So if I want it to go away, I'll just double click on it, say bye motion editor, see you later. So let's continue with this animation. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is actually transform this a little bit. So going over to my tool set here, I'm going to choose the free transform tool, select my object, and let's give it a little tilt. So now you can see it kind of comes up like that. Then we can go out to further along in the timeline, and let's actually tip the bottle over and position it something like that. So now it lifts up and tilts as if we are pouring the absinthe. So something really interesting that I want to note about this little dotted line here, each one of these small points in between the big points represents a single frame. The big points, of course, represent keyframes. Something you can do with the selection tool with nothing selected, you'll notice when I hover over here, it turns into an arc near my cursor. Or through Connect, you might not be able to see that, but trust me, it does. So you can click on it, and you can actually bend these things to make them a little smoother. So now it kind of comes up nice and smooth in an arc. So lots and lots of potential here for tweaking these animations. So at this point, we can say, all right, let's go to frame 50. Let's say between frame 38 and 50, the absinthe is being poured. At this point, we can actually insert timeline keyframe right here, and it'll do that for us, copying all the properties that we have. And then we set the bottle back down. So we pretty much reverse what we've already done. So let's go over here, and oops. We'll simply rotate that with the free transform tool a little bit. And then again, go over to another point and rotate once again to set it back down. Anytime you want to preview this, you can go back into frame 1 here. You can always hit rewind. There's all sorts of playhead controls down here, so you can play it and see actually what it looks like in real time. So that's pretty good. One additional thing that I want to do to this particular animation is use the drawing tools to actually have absinthe appear in here and then fill up into the dose line of my glass. So to do that, I'm actually going to create a new layer. And let's actually lock down both of these layers so I don't accidentally mess with them. And I'll rename this layer Dose. So you just double click on the layer name and type in your new bits there. So here I want to insert blank keyframe. I don't have anything in this layer yet. So insert timeline keyframe. So I could choose blank keyframe if I wanted to. It doesn't really matter because there's nothing here anyway. It's going to be blank. So choosing that keyframe, I can go ahead and look at all the different content creation tools I have. So one thing I can choose is my brush tool. So with the brush tool, I'm going to choose a fill color. So we'll choose a dark green here. And then in my properties panel, I can change the size of this brush. And I can even modify the brush if I want to. There's actually the ability to create new brushes inside of Flash Professional now. But in the interest of time, let's go in and just draw a dose of absinthe here. Now, that doesn't look all that great because it's just like a big blob over the glass. What you can do is select that, choose Modify, Convert to Symbol, and let's make this a movie clip symbol too. I'll just call this Dose, and hit OK. You'll notice this is now a movie clip symbol, and inside of the Properties panel, movie clip symbols have tons and tons of properties. So I can go in here and in Display, I have blend modes just like you would have in Photoshop. So I can choose Multiply, and check that out. It does a multiply on that, and it looks pretty awesome. So what do I actually want to do from here to there? Let's create a new motion tween. So right-clicking on that particular span, it creates a new motion tween for me. And I'm going to go here and insert timeline, a new keyframe. But then down here, I want this to sort of appear. I want it to fill up the glass. So let's choose the free transform tool. I'm going to shift the transform point, which is this dot here, to the bottom. That allows everything to transform in perspective of that dot. And then I'm going to kind of squeeze the edges together like this. So what'll happen is it'll actually fill up for us. So pretty neat. If I go in here, if I want to test this out and see how it looks, I can always do a control test. So here it's going to export my SWF. And it's blown up right now, but I can see that animation take place. And it looks pretty good. There's, of course, stuff we can do to this to make it even better. I obviously don't have time to animate each and every one of these, but one of the assets that I've provided is the entire thing completed. So each one of these steps in the final bit, and you can find all of these assets on that link there. So if we go in here, you'll notice that it pours, and I've actually got the absinthe coming out of the absinthe bottle, and it fills up there. And I do the same thing with each of these. So going in here, placing the spoon on top, and I know I'm going to have to stop, sugar and so forth. So, this should show you exactly, how powerful Flash Professional can be. And you'll notice, like, this one's very complex, what I have going on here, but really it's just the same stuff that I just showed you inside of that one particular animated movie clip. It's just, using those same techniques on a number of additional layers. So, Flash Professional, I keep saying this to people, Adobe's all about creativity right now. Flash Professional is, in my opinion, the most creative product they have. And you can do anything with it. You can publish to so many different targets, not just Flash Player, not just Air. So definitely, let people know Flash Pro is it's something that is, an active project at Adobe. It's something that can be used in educational settings for infographics and stuff like this, but all other stuff. And, if you want to see more, because I've got an afternoon session coming up, so please, visit us this afternoon, and we'll look at how to convert this into an interactive HTML5 Canvas presentation instead. So, thanks.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you very much, Joseph. That was just wonderful. I'm just wondering if there are any questions for Joseph. If you could please pop them into the questions pod there. We've just got a little bit of feedback. I know I'm not a huge Flash user. Actually, I'm not a Flash user, but I feel confident that after watching that, that's something I could give it a go. The next presentation is at 3 p.m. Californian time. So wherever you are, work with that, and Joseph will be taking that animation and stepping up to the next step. So thank you for everyone who's joined us today. Are there any questions at all for Joseph? Just pop them into the questions pod. If not, I think you guys all need to go and have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see some of you back here.
Just wanted to mention that, if anybody has any questions about this stuff or, anything regarding Flash Pro or the Flash platform, feel free to email me or, get with me on Twitter or anything like that. Education Exchange, make some discussions around there and drag me in. I'd be happy to participate.
Thank you, Joseph. So yes, in here, Helen, same link. I'm just quickly trying to get you a link to the session. I have that just here so that you can have a look at the website. That'll give you the information you need. And of course, the mouse battery has decided to die right now. Thanks, Joseph. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Excellent. So there's a link for you, Helen, to find the session. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. And we will see you all later this afternoon, I hope. I'm just going to